The day I learned that doing right could make enemies was the day my life changed forever. My name is Arden Wycliffe, and I speak today as a woman who survived quiet battles inside loud offices. Before I begin, please like this video, share it with someone who needs courage, and subscribe to this channel, because stories like mine must be heard. I never wanted attention. I never wanted power. I only wanted to work with a clean heart and serve God wherever He placed me. When I joined Branton Crust Group, a massive corporation with over 500 workers, I believed honesty was enough. I believed kindness was safe. I was wrong. From my first week, I chose to treat everyone the same. Managers, cleaners, security guards, casual workers who were barely noticed. I greeted them. I listened. I helped when I could. My faith taught me that no one is small in God's eyes. People loved me for it. But love, I learned, can also attract danger. I prayed every morning before work. I asked God to help me walk upright. I did not know that prayer was already drawing a line, one that some people hated. They watched me quietly. They smiled. They nodded. And somewhere behind those smiles, plans were forming. Branton Crust Group was not just big. It was powerful. The buildings were tall. The systems were complex. The rules were strict. With over 500 staff, both permanent and casual, everything moved fast. Numbers mattered. Reports mattered. Reputation mattered most of all. At first, I felt proud to work there. I believed God had placed me there for a reason. My role required accuracy and trust. I handled records, approvals, and internal reports. I took that responsibility seriously. But as weeks turned into months, I noticed something strange. Some people lived comfortably beyond their salaries. Some decisions were rushed. Some numbers felt too neat. When questions were asked, they were brushed aside with polished words and official language. I stayed quiet. I observed. I prayed. What troubled me most was how certain workers were treated. Casual staff were often ignored. Cleaners were spoken to harshly. Security guards were treated like walls, not people. That hurt me deeply. So I did what felt natural. I showed respect. I listened when they spoke. I thanked them. I defended them when they were blamed unfairly. Slowly, trust grew. They spoke freely around me. I did not know that trust was dangerous currency. I never imagined that kindness could be seen as rebellion. Every morning, I greeted the cleaners by name. Edrin Hale, Maura Pryn, and old Silas Kent, who worked security at the back gate. I asked how their families were. I shared smiles. Sometimes prayers. They responded with warmth. With loyalty. Soon, others noticed. Some colleagues laughed softly. Others watched in silence. A few stopped talking when I entered a room. I did not understand why until one afternoon, when a senior staff member, Selby Crown, said quietly, "You are too visible, Arden." I smiled and ignored it. Workers trusted me because I did not report their fears to management. I only encouraged them to do right. When mistakes happened, I helped fix them instead of blaming people. That made some leaders uncomfortable. I began to hear whispers. My name passed through rooms I had never entered. Meetings happened without me. Smiles became tight. Still, I stood firm. My faith would not allow me to change. I believed God was pleased. I believed honesty would protect me. I did not know that honesty was already being counted against me. The more people trusted me, the more certain leaders pulled away. I noticed it in small ways. Emails excluded me. Approvals delayed. Invitations withdrawn. When I spoke in meetings, eyes avoided mine. When I stayed silent, they relaxed. Yet the workers kept coming. They told me things they told no one else. Missing supplies. Changed figures. Instructions given verbally, never written down. I always advised caution. I never accused. I never exposed. But someone was watching. One evening, as I packed my bag, Myrex Dalton, a senior officer, stopped by my desk. He smiled too politely. "You are loved here," he said. Sometimes, love can be misunderstood. I thanked him and went home uneasy. That night, I prayed longer than usual. I asked God to help me stay clean. I did not ask him to fight for me. I did not yet know I needed defending. By the next week, the air had changed. I was no longer just different. I was a problem. Hatred does not always shout. Sometimes, it whispers behind smiles. I felt it everywhere. In delayed responses. In sudden policy reminders. In looks that said more than words ever could. I had done nothing wrong, yet I was being slowly pushed to the edge. I heard my name tied to phrases like too righteous and difficult to control. Someone said my faith made others uncomfortable. Another said I made people talk too much. That frightened me. Still, I refused to change. I continued to pray. I continued to work honestly. I continued to treat everyone with dignity. I believed God would protect me. What I did not know is that plans were already being written, carefully, quietly, officially. Files were being touched. Records shifted. Stories prepared. And my name was written at the center. The whispers started quietly. At first, I thought it was my imagination. Conversation stopped when I entered a room. Laughter softened. Eyes moved away too fast. I told myself to stay calm and keep working. But the whispers grew. I heard my name spoken in corners. I heard it tied to words like too involved and not loyal. One day, I walked past the records room and heard Selby Crown say, "She asks too many questions." I did not ask questions. I only did my job. That night, I opened my Bible to Proverbs and prayed for wisdom. I asked God to help me speak only when needed and stay silent when silence was safer. The next day, a casual worker, Pella Morse, warned me. She said some managers were angry because workers trusted me more than them. She said they felt exposed. I thanked her and prayed again. I still did not defend myself. I believed truth would speak for me. The first report against me came on a Monday morning. I was called into a small office by Myrex Dalton and Orlin Vay. They smiled, but their eyes were cold. They said there was concern about my influence over staff. I was confused. They accused me of sharing company matters with casual workers. They said I encouraged disobedience. I felt my heart sink. I told the truth. I said I only encouraged respect and honesty. I said I followed company rules. They nodded and wrote notes. Later, I learned that a false report had been filed using my name. It claimed I changed records without permission. I knew it was a lie. I went home shaking. I cried. I prayed. I asked God why this was happening. I heard no voice, but peace slowly came. The next day, I returned to work on time, calm and steady. People who once greeted me warmly became careful. Some avoided me completely. Others smiled but no longer spoke freely. I understood their fear. No one wanted trouble. Only the least expected still stood by me. Security guard Silas Kent nodded at me daily. Cleaner Maura Pryn whispered prayers for me. Casual workers still trusted me. That made my enemies angrier. I was removed from certain duties without explanation. Access codes were changed. I was watched closely. Yet I worked harder. I stayed honest. I kept praying. One afternoon, I overheard someone say she thinks God will save her. I smiled quietly. That night, I fasted and prayed. I asked God to help me stay upright even if I lost everything. The trap was set carefully, and I did not see it coming. One morning, the office felt heavier than usual. People spoke in low voices. Screens were turned away when I walked past. Before midday, I was called into a meeting room. On the table were printed reports, spread out like proof waiting to speak. A large transaction had gone wrong. Important files were missing. Numbers did not match. Approval code showed my name, even though I knew I had never touched that process. My hands trembled as I looked at the pages. My heart pounded. I felt shocked and confused. They said it was a serious issue. Words like audit, investigation, and discipline were used slowly, carefully. Some people watched me closely, searching my face. A few could not hide their quiet smiles. Others looked afraid, as if they knew something was wrong but were too scared to speak. I understood then. Someone wanted me to fall. This was not a mistake. It was a plan. My chest felt tight, but I stayed calm. I did not shout. I did not argue. I did not accuse anyone. Instead, I asked for time. I told them I needed to pray. The room went silent. They did not expect that response. They expected fear. They expected anger. I could have lied to save myself. That truth still sits heavy in my heart. I could have changed my story to match theirs. I could have pointed at someone else. I could have cried loudly and begged for mercy. Many people expected me to do that. But I did not. I chose the harder path. When they questioned me, I spoke calmly. I answered only what I knew. I refused to add words that were not true. Some faces showed surprise. Others showed disappointment. They wanted fear. They wanted panic. Instead, they met peace. Each morning before work, I opened my Bible. I prayed quietly at my desk. I asked God for strength, not escape. I asked Him to help me stand upright even if the outcome hurt me. The pressure was heavy. I felt watched everywhere. My steps. My emails. My silence. Still, I worked carefully and honestly. I refused shortcuts. I refused bitterness. At night, fear tried to creep in. I wondered if I would lose my job. I wondered if my name would be ruined. When those thoughts came, I prayed again. Something inside me began to change. I was no longer afraid of losing approval. I only feared losing my integrity. The email came early in the morning. I was placed on temporary suspension while the investigation continued. The words were polite, but they cut deep. I was told to hand over my access card and leave the building. People watched as I walked out. Some faces showed pity. Others showed relief. A few looked pleased. I kept my head high, even though my heart felt heavy. Outside the building, I sat in my car and prayed. I thanked God for His presence. I asked Him to guard my name. I asked Him to help me trust Him fully. At home, fear tried to settle in. I wondered how long this would last. I wondered if the truth would be buried. Still, I chose faith. I fasted. I prayed. I read my Bible daily. During my suspension, I received messages I did not expect. Casual workers reached out. Cleaners. Security staff. People with no power on paper. They told me they believed me. They said they had seen strange things before. One name stood out, Silas Kent. He told me he had noticed late-night file movements and shared log times that did not match records. He said he had kept quiet before out of fear. Now, he was ready to speak. I prayed and thanked God. The investigation did not stop where my enemies hoped it would. What began as a simple review slowly turned into a deeper search. Auditors asked for more records. They checked system logs and access times. They compared dates, signatures, and approvals. The process was slow, but it was steady. I was called back for questioning. This time, the room felt different. The same faces sat across from me, but their voices were softer. They asked me to explain my work again, step by step. I answered calmly. I spoke only the truth. I did not rush. I did not defend myself with anger. I prayed quietly in my heart as I spoke. Soon, small details began to appear. Timestamps showed activity when I was not present. Logs showed my access being used during hours I was at home. Questions were raised that could no longer be ignored. Then something unexpected happened. Other staff began to speak. Not managers. Not executives. Ordinary workers. They spoke of late-night movements. Of pressure to stay silent. Of things that never felt right. Their stories matched. I watched the faces in the room change as the truth slowly took shape. As the truth became clearer, fear entered the room. Meetings were no longer confident. Voices shook. Papers were handled too carefully. People who once spoke boldly now chose their words slowly. I noticed it in their eyes. They avoided looking at me. People now looked at me differently, not with suspicion, but with respect. When I returned fully to work, something had changed. The office felt calmer. Conversations slowed when I passed, not from fear, but from thought. People watched me with new eyes. The same halls that once felt cold now carried quiet respect. No announcement was made yet. No public apology. Still, I felt the shift. Managers greeted me carefully. Some smiled, unsure. Others spoke formally, as if words now mattered more. I continued my work without pride. I kept my head down and my heart steady. Each morning, I prayed at my desk. I thanked God for restoring my name. I asked Him to keep me humble. Workers returned to speaking freely around me. Casual staff felt safe again. I listened, but I did not repeat stories. I knew better now. Twist, respect returned not through words, but through silence and changed behavior. I began to notice new faces watching me. Not with suspicion. With interest. Senior leaders asked for my input more often. They reviewed my reports carefully. Questions were fair this time. They listened when I spoke. One afternoon, Eldrick Rowe, a board member rarely seen on site, stopped me in the hallway. He thanked me for my integrity. I was surprised. I went home that day deep in prayer. After my return, I began to feel a shift across the company. It did not happen in one day. It came slowly, like fresh air entering a closed room. Policies were reviewed. Procedures became stricter. Access rules were enforced more clearly. People spoke with care, knowing that every action mattered. I noticed how casual workers were treated differently. Their voices were no longer ignored. Complaints were taken seriously. Respect became part of daily work, not just words in a handbook. No one told me why these changes happened. But I understood. My case had opened eyes. What was once hidden could no longer stay in the dark. I felt humbled knowing God had used my pain to protect others. Each morning, I prayed quietly at my desk. I asked God to help me remain gentle. I did not want pride to grow where humility should live. I kept doing my work faithfully, without trying to lead change. Yet change followed. People became careful with numbers, honest with records, fair with decisions. The office felt safer. One morning, an email appeared in my inbox. It invited me to attend a leadership review meeting. My name stood among senior staff I had only seen from a distance. My hands paused over the keyboard as I read it again. I felt nervous. I prayed before replying. I asked God to guide my steps and my words. I did not want attention. I only wanted to remain upright. At the meeting, the questions surprised me. They were not about numbers or performance alone. They were about fairness, integrity, and trust. They asked how workers should be treated, how honesty could be protected. I answered simply and truthfully. People listened. Some nodded. Some took notes. When the meeting ended, no explanations were given. No promises were made. But something had shifted. As I walked back to my desk, my heart felt calm. A sealed envelope waited on my desk that afternoon. It was unusual. Most messages came by email. I picked it up slowly, feeling its weight. Inside was a printed invitation. It spoke of a company-wide event. Words like recognition and honor stood out, though no names were listed. My heart beat faster. I did not celebrate. I did not tell anyone. I simply closed my eyes and prayed. I thanked God for carrying me through the storm. I asked Him to prepare my heart for whatever was coming. People passed my desk, unaware of what I held. The office moved as usual. Phones rang. Screens glowed. Yet everything felt different. That evening, I went home and read my Bible. I trusted God completely. Whether the event brought joy or silence, I knew He had already vindicated me. The event hall was brighter than I expected. Lights filled the room. Music played softly. Staff from every department gathered together, permanent workers, casual workers, cleaners, guards, managers. Over 500 people sat in the same space. I felt small walking in. I wore a simple dress. I carried no expectations. I prayed quietly as I found my seat. My heart beat fast, but I stayed calm. Senior leaders took the stage. They spoke about growth, values, and integrity. Names were called. Awards were given. Applause filled the hall. Then the room grew quiet. A speaker paused and said, "Tonight, we honor someone who stood upright when it was costly." My breath caught. The speaker said my name clearly. For a moment, I did not move. I thought I had heard wrong. People turned toward me. The room began to clap. I stood slowly, my legs shaking. As I walked forward, memories rushed in, the whispers, the suspension, the lies. I felt tears rise, but I held them back. They spoke about the investigation. About truth. About how my honesty had protected the company from deeper harm. They spoke of courage and faith. I bowed my head and thanked God. Just when I thought the moment was complete, the speaker paused again. He invited several people to stand. At first, I did not understand. Then I saw them, cleaners, security guards, casual workers. Faces I knew well. Faces I had greeted every morning. Faces others often ignored. My heart began to pound. One by one, they spoke. They shared how they had noticed strange movements, late-night activity, and pressure to stay silent. They spoke of fear, but also of truth. They said my kindness gave them courage. They said my fairness made them believe honesty was possible. The hall was silent. I could hear quiet crying around me. I could not stop my own tears. God had used the very people I treated with dignity to protect my name. I looked at them and bowed my head. I remembered every smile, every greeting, every prayer whispered at work. None of it was wasted. Just as I thought the night could not surprise me again, the speaker smiled. He spoke of gratitude. He spoke of loss restored. Then he said words that shook the room. As a sign of honor, he said, the company has decided to gift her a house. Gasps filled the hall. A screen lit up behind him. A real house appeared, simple, warm, beautiful. I stared at it, unable to breathe. My knees felt weak. I covered my mouth as tears fell freely. I had lost sleep. I had lost peace. I had almost lost my name. And now, God had returned more than I imagined. I did not ask for this. I did not expect this. I only asked God to defend the truth. When I stepped forward to speak, the room was quiet. I held the award in trembling hands. I looked at faces filled with respect, some with regret, some with joy. I took a deep breath. I thanked God first. I spoke about prayer. About kindness. About standing upright even when it hurts. I told them that integrity may cost you friends, but it will never cost you God. I thanked the workers who stood for truth. I thanked those who listened. I spoke gently, without anger. I never rejoiced over those who had ganged up against me but had lost their jobs instead. They were only reaping what they had sown and falling into their own pits. As I left the stage, peace wrapped around my heart. I had been accused. I had been suspended. I had been misunderstood. But I was never abandoned. The perpetrators of the act had been fired and integrity was taking its full stand at the office. And that is my testimony.